The heart has its own language. I spent 43 years learning to speak it. But I was deaf to the whispers coming from the woman I loved most. My name is Dr. Richard Caldwell. I'm 82 years old, and I've been carrying a weight that no amount of medical knowledge can lift. For over 4 decades, I was the head of cardiology at Presbyterian Medical Center. I've published over 200 papers on cardiovascular disease. I've saved thousands of lives, but I couldn't save the one that mattered most. You see, the heart doesn't always scream when it's dying. Sometimes it whispers, and Margaret. My Margaret. She was whispering for 3 years, and I didn't hear her. Let me tell you about Margaret first. Because if you're going to understand why I failed her so completely, you need to know who she was. Margaret had this way of organizing life that made chaos impossible. Every morning at 6:15, she'd wake up humming, not loudly, just this soft, unconscious melody that would drift from the kitchen as she made coffee. The sound of ceramic mugs clinking against saucers, the rustle of newspaper pages, the gentle scratch of her pen as she wrote notes in the margins of articles she thought might interest me. She had these reading glasses that were always sliding down her nose, little wire-rimmed things she'd bought at the drugstore because she refused to admit she needed real ones. She'd peer over them at me with this look, half amused, half exasperated, whenever I'd leave my medical journals scattered across the dining room table. "Richard," she'd say, and just the way she said my name with this particular mixture of fondness and mock severity could make me smile even after the worst day at the hospital. Margaret collected moments. Not photographs, not souvenirs, but moments. She'd remember the exact shade of yellow the maple tree turned on October 15th, or the way our neighbor's cat would sit in the afternoon sunlight, or how I looked when I was reading something that surprised me. "You get this little crease right here," she'd say, touching the spot between my eyebrows, "when medical research contradicts something you thought you knew." She was right. She was always right about things like that. 3 years before the end. That autumn morning started like thousands of others. The smell of dark roast coffee mixing with the faint lavender scent of the hand lotion Margaret used every night. The soft thud of the newspaper hitting our front steps. The familiar symphony of our morning routine. But when I came downstairs, Margaret wasn't humming. She was standing at the kitchen counter, both hands pressed flat against the marble surface, breathing in that careful, controlled way people breathe when they're trying not to show something's wrong. "Everything all right, sweetheart?" She turned to me with that smile, the one I'd learned to recognize as her "Don't worry, Richard" smile. But there was something in her eyes, a flicker of uncertainty, fear. It passed so quickly I almost missed it. Just caught my breath for a moment. "I think I'm coming down with something." I reached for my stethoscope, the reflex of 4 decades. In medicine, her heart sounded perfect. Regular rhythm, no murmurs, no irregularities. I felt her forehead with the back of my hand, the gesture automatic and oddly intimate after 35 years of marriage. "You're fine," I declared with the confidence that had earned me a reputation as one of the city's best cardiologists. "Probably just a little fatigue. You've been working too hard in that garden of yours." But here's what I didn't see, what I chose not to see. Margaret had stopped taking the stairs 2 at a time. She'd started sitting down to put on her shoes. When she carried groceries from the car, she'd make 2 trips instead of trying to manage everything at once. Small changes. Adaptive changes. The kind of subtle adjustments our bodies make when they're trying to conserve energy for something more important than we realize. The first warning sign was staring me in the face, and I missed it completely. What I should have known. What I taught my students every semester is that women's heart disease doesn't announce itself with Hollywood drama. It doesn't come with the crushing chest pain, the dramatic collapse, the obvious emergency that sends you racing to the hospital. It creeps in quietly, like fog rolling over a harbor, changing the landscape so gradually you don't notice until You can't see the familiar landmarks anymore. Margaret's fatigue wasn't the normal tiredness we all feel. It was different, deeper. She'd wake up exhausted after 8 hours of sleep, as if rest couldn't touch whatever was draining her energy. Simple tasks, folding a load of laundry, preparing dinner, would leave her needing to sit down, to catch her breath, to gather strength for the next ordinary moment. The heart, you see, is essentially a pump. When it begins to struggle, when the arteries that feed the heart muscle itself start to narrow, the pump becomes less efficient. The body, in its wisdom, goes into conservation mode. It starts rationing energy, saving it for essential functions. But because the heart isn't completely failing yet, there are moments when it can keep up, creating those deceptive good days that make us think everything's fine. I knew this. I diagnosed it hundreds of times in my patients. I'd written papers about it. But when it's your wife making excuses about why she needs to rest after one flight of stairs, when it's the woman who used to hike 10-mile mountain trails with you, somehow all that medical knowledge becomes useless, because admitting what you're seeing means admitting something you can't bear to face. 2 years before. Richard, do you think we could take the elevator today? We were at Riverside Mall, just 2 floors up to the department store where Margaret wanted to buy a birthday gift for our daughter Sarah. 2 years earlier, Margaret would have bounded up those stairs, probably taking them 2 at a time just to show off, just to prove she could keep up with anyone half her age. The elevator was slow, one of those ancient things that groaned and wheezed between floors. As we waited, I watched Margaret lean almost imperceptibly against the wall, and I felt something cold settle in my stomach. A fear I didn't want to name. Of course, sweetheart. But inside, I was calculating. When had stairs become Margaret's enemy? Not just these stairs, all stairs. Our home stairs, which she now climbed with one hand on the railing, pausing at the landing. The stairs at church, where she'd started choosing seats closer to the back so she wouldn't have to walk as far. Even the 3 steps up to our front porch seemed to require a moment's pause, a quick hand on the railing for balance. I convinced myself it was her knees. Arthritis runs in her family, I told myself. She's 67, this is normal aging, normal aging. How easily we doctors throw around that phrase when we don't want to see what's right in front of us. That evening, Margaret was doing what she always did, reading in her chair by the window, a cup of chamomile tea growing cold on the side table. She had this ritual: tea at 8 o'clock, always in the same blue ceramic mug, always with exactly 1 teaspoon of honey. She'd curl up in that chair with her book and her reading glasses sliding down her nose, and the lamp would cast this warm circle of light around her, but something was wrong with the picture. She kept shifting positions, rolling her shoulders, pressing her hand to the space between her shoulder blades. "Your back bothering you again?" "Just a little stiffness," she said, not looking up from her book. "Must have slept wrong." But I noticed, finally, I was starting to notice that she'd been sleeping wrong a lot lately. 3 or 4 times a week, she'd wake up with that same discomfort, the same need to stretch and massage the muscles between her shoulders. Here's what medical school teaches you: men having heart attacks clutch their chests. The pain is dramatic, obvious, impossible to ignore. Women feel it differently. The pain radiates through nerve pathways that don't necessarily lead where you'd expect. In women, heart pain often manifests as a deep, aching sensation between the shoulder blades, or a burning feeling across the upper back. The cruel thing about this kind of pain is that it's not constant. It comes with exertion, physical or emotional stress, and goes away with rest. So it masquerades as muscle strain, poor posture, the inevitable aches of aging. It gives us plausible explanations for something much more serious. I must have massaged Margaret's shoulders 1,000 times in those months, working my thumbs into the knots of tension, never once thinking that I was treating the symptom of a dying heart. The fear was growing now, a cold presence in the back of my mind that I refused to acknowledge. Because acknowledging it would mean doing something about it. And doing something about it would mean admitting that Margaret, my healthy, vibrant, immortal Margaret, might be sick 18 months before. "The strangest thing happened today," Margaret said as we sat down to dinner. She'd made my favorite pot roast with those little red potatoes that somehow tasted better when she made them than when anyone else in the world made them. The kitchen smelled like rosemary and garlic, like home, like 35 years of shared meals and quiet conversations. "What's that?" I was having lunch with Patricia at that new cafe downtown, and suddenly I felt so strange, like the room was tilting, but not tilting. Does that make sense? I had to grip the table to steady myself. I looked at her across our dining room table, the same oak table where we'd shared nearly 15,000 meals together, where we'd celebrated birthdays and anniversaries, where we'd argued about money and laughed about our children's latest adventures. Her color was good. She seemed steady, alert. When she reached for the salt, her hand was steady. "Did you eat breakfast this morning?" "Of course." "You know I never skip breakfast." "Blood sugar then. Or maybe an inner ear infection. I'll take a look after dinner." But even as I said it, even as I offered these reasonable explanations, I knew they weren't right. Margaret had never had blood sugar issues. She was one of those people who ate like clockwork, never skipped meals, never had dramatic swings in energy. And she'd never had ear problems. Later that night, I did examine her ears with my otoscope. Normal. I checked her blood pressure. Slightly elevated, but nothing dramatic. When I listened to her heart with my stethoscope, it sounded like Margaret's heart. The same heart I'd been listening to for years during her annual checkups, the same rhythm I'd grown to know as well as my own. But here's what I couldn't hear with my stethoscope. The electrical system of her heart was starting to misfire. The heart isn't just a pump, it's an electrical marvel. Every heartbeat begins with an electrical impulse that originates in a small cluster of cells called the sinoatrial node. This impulse travels through specialized pathways, telling different parts of the heart muscle when to contract, creating the coordinated squeeze that pushes blood through our bodies when those pathways get damaged, whether from blocked arteries, reducing blood flow to the heart's electrical system, or from aging tissue that can't conduct signals as efficiently. The electrical impulses can become erratic. It can cause sudden drops in blood pressure, momentary decreases in blood flow to the brain, and that terrible feeling Margaret described, like the world is shifting beneath your feet. In my arrogance, in my desperate need to find an explanation, that wasn't heart disease. I dismissed it as a minor inner ear issue. I never ordered an EKG, never considered that her heart's electrical system might be sending out distress signals. After all, her heart sounded fine to my stethoscope, but a stethoscope can't hear electricity. It can't detect the subtle irregularities that might only last a few seconds, but signal something much more serious brewing beneath the surface. The fear was getting harder to ignore now. It would wake me up at night, this cold certainty that something was wrong with Margaret. But every morning she'd be there in the kitchen, humming softly as she made coffee, and the fear would seem ridiculous, paranoid, the product of a medical mind that saw disease everywhere. So I buried it, pushed it down, focused on my patients, on cases where the symptoms were clear and the solutions were straightforward. 12 months before. "I think I'm developing quite the sweet tooth in my old age," Margaret announced one morning, laughing, as she added a second spoonful of sugar to her coffee. They should have been my red flag. My screaming, waving, impossible to ignore red flag. Margaret had never had a sweet tooth. In 35 years of marriage, I'd watched her push dessert away, choose an apple over cake, barely touch the holiday cookies she baked for everyone else. She was one of those naturally healthy eaters who preferred the taste of real food to processed sweetness. But suddenly, she was craving sugar. Not just wanting it, craving it with an intensity that seemed to surprise even her. "The strangest thing," she'd say, unwrapping yet another peppermint from the glass bowl on our coffee table. "I can't seem to get enough of these." Or honey in her tea, spoonfuls of it instead of her usual single teaspoon. Or an extra piece of fruit after dinner, then another. I should have known. Should have seen it immediately. When the heart begins to fail, when the cardiovascular system starts struggling to deliver nutrients efficiently throughout the body goes into panic mode. It starts demanding quick sources of energy, and nothing provides energy faster than sugar. The brain, sensing that something is wrong with the delivery system, sends out chemical signals demanding immediate fuel. But there's another, more insidious reason for sudden sugar cravings. When circulation begins to decline, when blood flow to the extremities and sensory organs becomes less efficient, taste buds don't function as well as they used to. Foods that once tasted perfectly seasoned now seem bland, flavorless. The natural response is to add more sugar, more salt, more of anything that might make food taste the way it used to. What I was witnessing wasn't Margaret developing new preferences in her golden years. It was her body desperately trying to compensate for a cardiovascular system that was slowly, quietly shutting down. I knew this. I'd written about it in medical journals. I'd lectured on it to residents. But when your wife starts putting honey on everything, when she reaches for her third peppermint of the afternoon, you think, how sweet, she's discovering new tastes in retirement. You don't think, her heart is dying and her body is screaming for help. The denial was complete now, absolute. I had become an expert at not seeing what was right in front of me. 6 months before the night that should have shattered my denial, Margaret woke me up at 2:47 a.m. Richard, wake up. I came out of sleep the way doctors learn to, instantly alert, mind already running through possibilities. But when I looked at Margaret in the dim green glow of our bedside clock, she didn't look like someone having a medical emergency. She was sitting up in bed, looking more puzzled than alarmed. "I can't catch my breath," she said quietly. "I was dreaming about our honeymoon, and I woke up feeling like I'd been running up that mountain trail we hiked in Colorado." Her breathing was indeed shallow, rapid, but not labored in the way I'd expect from someone having a heart attack. She wasn't clutching her chest, wasn't sweating, wasn't showing any of the classic signs I'd been trained to recognize in 40 years of emergency medicine. Any chest pain? No. Arm pain? Jaw pain? No, nothing like that. I just I can't seem to get a good deep breath. I listened to her lungs with my stethoscope. Clear. No wheezing, no fluid sounds. Her heart rate was elevated, but that made sense if she'd been struggling to breathe. After about 10 minutes, her breathing returned to normal. "Probably just a vivid dream," I said, settling back into bed. "Or maybe you were lying on your side wrong, compressed your diaphragm." She accepted this explanation because she trusted me. Because I was her husband, and I was a cardiologist, and if anyone would know when something was wrong with her heart, it would be me. But here's the truth that haunts me every single night. I didn't want to see it. I couldn't bear the possibility that Margaret, my healthy, vibrant, younger than her years Margaret, might be seriously ill. So I explained away every symptom, justified every change, found medical reasons for everything that had nothing to do with the real reason. The medical term for what Margaret experienced is paroxysmal nocturnal dyspnea. It sounds clinical, sterile. But what it really means is that your heart is so weak it can't handle the simple challenge of lying flat. When we lie down, gravity stops helping our circulation. Blood that has pooled in our legs during the day suddenly has to be pumped back up to the heart. Fluid that our kidneys have been processing all day suddenly shifts, putting extra pressure on a cardiovascular system that's already struggling. A healthy heart handles this transition easily, automatically adjusting its rhythm and force. A failing heart DOESN . So the body wakes you up, gasping, forcing you to sit upright so gravity can help your struggling cardiovascular system. It's not a nightmare that steals your breath. It's your heart, frantically waving a white flag of surrender. This happened to Margaret 6 more times in the months that followed. 6 times she woke up breathless. 6 times I found explanations that had nothing to do with her heart. Bad dreams, sleeping position, maybe hormonal changes. 6 times I chose blindness over truth. The fear was constant now, a weight in my chest that never left. But alongside the fear was something worse, the growing certainty that I was failing as both a doctor and a husband. That my medical training, instead of helping me save the woman I loved, was somehow making me blind to her suffering. 2 weeks before, "I think we should cancel the dinner party," Margaret said. I looked up from my medical journal, startled. This wasn't like her. Our monthly dinner parties were Margaret's joy, her chance to bring together friends and neighbors around. Our dining room table. She'd spend days planning menus, polishing the good silver, arranging flowers from her garden. The idea of canceling would normally be unthinkable. "You're not feeling well?" "I'm feeling fine," she said. But she was sitting down while she said it, sitting at the kitchen island while she talked about chopping vegetables, sitting while she planned a dinner that would require hours of standing, cooking, orchestrating. I just think, maybe something smaller this time. Maybe we could just order from that Italian place you like. I should have seen it then. Should have seen that my vibrant, energetic wife was rationing her strength like a person preparing for a siege. Should have noticed that the woman who used to dance around the kitchen while cooking, who used to hum while she stirred and seasoned and tasted, was now calculating every movement, conserving every ounce of energy for the essential tasks of living. But I didn't see it. I was too busy being grateful that she wasn't complaining about anything specific. No chest pain, no obvious distress. Just my practical Margaret, being sensible about entertaining. "That sounds perfect," I said, and went back to reading about the latest advances in cardiac catheterization. 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning that started like any other, Margaret collapsed in our kitchen while making my coffee, the same coffee she'd made for me 12,775 times before. The same kitchen where she'd hummed thousands of morning songs, where the smell of dark roast had mingled with lavender hand lotion and the sound of newspaper pages turning. I found her on the tile floor, unconscious, her reading glasses broken. Beside her, one hand still reaching toward the coffee maker, as if she'd been trying to complete this one last act of love. The paramedics worked on her for 23 minutes in our kitchen. I counted every second, standing in the doorway of the room where we'd shared so many quiet mornings, watching strangers try to restart the heart I'd failed to protect. By the time we reached the hospital, my hospital, the place where I'd saved so many lives, her heart had stopped twice. By evening, the woman who had been the rhythm of my life for 35 years was gone. The autopsy revealed what I should have seen all along: massive coronary artery disease. 3 major blockages, each one severe enough to cause the symptoms I'd dismissed. Evidence of multiple small heart attacks over the previous months, silent heart attacks that had been slowly destroying her heart muscle, while I explained away every cry for help. You see, I'd spent my entire career treating hearts like mechanical problems, broken pumps that could be fixed with stents and bypasses and medications. I could read an EKG like a roadmap, identify patterns that revealed a heart's secrets. But Margaret's heart wasn't just a mechanical pump, it was the heart of the woman I loved. And somehow, that made me blind to its desperate signals. The irony is devastating, isn't it? I could diagnose heart disease in a stranger within minutes of shaking their hand. I could spot the subtle signs, the slight shortness of breath, the way they favored one arm, the particular shade of fatigue around their eyes. But when it came to the heart that beat beside mine every night for 35 years, I saw nothing. In the months after Margaret died, I went back through everything. Every comment, every symptom, every small change I dismissed. I could trace the progression of her heart disease like a timeline I'd refused to read. The fatigue that came in waves. That started 3 years before she died. The first sign that her heart was struggling to pump blood efficiently. The upper back pain she attributed to sleeping wrong. 2 years of her heart muscle crying out in the only way it knew how, sending pain signals through nerve pathways I'd studied, but somehow forgotten. The dizziness, the sugar cravings, the breathless nights. All of it was there. All of it was clear. All of it was documented in the quiet observations of a woman who trusted her cardiologist husband to notice when something was wrong. But here's what I need you to understand. What I desperately need you to understand. Margaret's symptoms weren't dramatic. They weren't the textbook presentation of heart disease that we doctors are trained to recognize. They were quiet, easy to dismiss, wrapped in the everyday language of a woman who didn't want to be a bother. And that's exactly how heart disease kills women. Quietly, politely, while everyone around them, including their doctors, finds perfectly reasonable explanations for symptoms that are actually emergency signals. Women's hearts don't fail the way men's hearts do. They don't announce their distress with crushing chest pain and dramatic collapses. They whisper, they hint. They send out subtle distress calls that masquerade as stress, as aging, as anything other than what they really are. Let me tell you. Those 5 warning signs again, because understanding them might save a life. First, unexplained fatigue that comes and goes. This isn't the normal tiredness we all feel after a long day. This is exhaustion that seems disproportionate to activity. That comes in waves. That can't be explained by sleep or stress alone. When the heart begins to struggle, the body conserves energy for essential functions, leaving you feeling drained by tasks that once seemed effortless. Second, upper back and shoulder pain that appears and disappears. Not constant pain, but recurring. Discomfort between the shoulder blades or across the upper back. In women, heart pain often travels through nerve pathways that end up in unexpected places, creating aches that seem to have no clear cause. Third, sudden dizziness or lightheadedness. Moments when the world seems to shift, when you need to grip something for stability. This happens when the heart's electrical system begins to misfire, causing brief drops in blood pressure that affect blood flow to the brain. Fourth, sudden, intense cravings for sugar or salt. When circulation becomes less efficient, the body demands quick energy and enhanced flavors to compensate for diminished taste and reduced nutrient delivery. Fifth, shortness of breath that wakes you from sleep. This isn't sleep apnea or nightmares, but waking up gasping, needing to sit up to catch your breath. It happens when the heart becomes too weak to handle the challenge of pumping blood efficiently while lying flat. These aren't just symptoms. They're love letters from a heart that's trying to stay alive. They're whispered pleas from a body that's fighting to keep going. Margaret sent me those love letters for 3 years. 5 different ways her heart tried to tell me it was in trouble. And I was too proud, too busy, too terrified of what I might find to listen. But you can listen. You can be what I wasn't. You can trust those whispers, honor those subtle signals, demand answers when something feels wrong. Don't wait for the dramatic collapse, the obvious heart attack, the undeniable emergency. By then, it may be too late. Trust your body. Trust those quiet signals. And remember that the heart that loves you most might be too polite to scream when it's dying. Can still smell the lavender hand lotion Margaret used every night. I can still hear the particular way she said my name when she wanted my attention. I can still see her reading glasses sliding down her nose as she looked at me over the morning paper. What I can't see is her sitting in that blue chair by the Theo window. Can't hear her humming in the kitchen. Can't feel her hand reaching for mine in the darkness of our bedroom. Don't let the whispers go unheard. Don't make my mistake. Your heart is trying to tell you something. Please. Please listen.